Good evening and welcome to Mental Health Matters After Hours. And you are getting a double dose of our show because we know you might need mental health support even when the office is closed. So we go out at 4 a.m. GMT for this show, and we cover all aspects of mental well-being and wellness in general. And in our morning show at 8 a.m. on a Thursday, this is American time, or 4 p.m. GMT, we talk about workplace well-being. Now, today's show has a very special guest all the way from America. It's Andrea Leigh, and she is a host on the Thriving Woman Network on E360 TV, and she's going to be telling us about her book, Do You Still Like Football?, as well as speaking about her own life changes. So let's have a little look at what this book is all about.
I had been in a box. We are all in boxes. We keep ourselves in these familiar, secure little boxes that we create for ourselves throughout the course of our lives. Sometimes others help us build them. Our families, our friends, our careers are influential in keeping us where everyone is content in little boxes. Living in the box I had made allowed me to attain success in my career, a debt-free life, a wonderful family, and fit the mold of the all-American life. The second image illustrated the last 2 years. Living as if I had cut a hole in the side of the box, venturing out, never getting too far from my comfy box. I couldn't. I had a chain around my ankle. Realizing that I could temporarily remove the chain wasn't good enough. The last image was a box that had been cut down at all four corners. It was lying open, all four sides flattened out. It was unusable. It couldn't contain me anymore. Pictured next to the box was a little red wagon, loaded with what I wanted to take with me. Pulling the wagon, I wasn't going back into a box.
Andrea, thank you so much for joining us on Mental Health Matters. It is such a pleasure and a privilege to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
That excerpt from your book, talking about being put into a box, and our friends and our family sometimes put us in the box, and then your image of still feeling chained and carrying it around. I think that's so powerful. I think a lot of people resonate with that. Can you tell me a little bit more about your book, Do You Still Like Football?
It's just a great story on a man that had an all-American life from the time he was a little boy, raised by a wonderful mother and father, has a wonderful sister, and lived a life in the 80s growing up in middle America, with a wonderful childhood and teenage years and college fun and trouble, and then went to work, put myself into a box, went to work and started a career and got married and had a kid. And what I realized is that the book is about how, having achieved all these boxes being checked and a debt-free life and a nice ranch, all these experiences behind me, I was still unfulfilled and I was searching. I just didn't know what I was searching for. So it's the story of listening to oneself and realizing that there can be more if you'll pay attention and you'll notice what's going on inside of you. So it's that story, and it's really touching. It's humorous. It's vulnerable, and it's a lot of life experience. And a lot of us have experiences that would make good reading. We don't put them in. We don't all turn into authors and write them down. Maybe we should consider doing that. But I just decided to write mine down, and then the way my transition turned out just made it worth really telling, because it just breaks the narrative of what we hear all the time in the media and across social media. It breaks the narrative. And I like doing that myself. I didn't intend to do this journey, play it out the way it's played out, but I'm willing to, I'm here talking to you.
Yes.
So.
And I'm really grateful for that, because your story in some ways is very different, because it is about successfully checking those boxes, successfully getting there, but always feeling that sense of unfulfillment. And I love how you describe yourself as a disruptor. That's a very positive statement, very positive label there. And then you talk about from farmer to fashion, from ranching to public speaking. Why is that approach, being a disruptor, so important to you?
Well, I think that it was and I'm glad you see the disruptor as a positive. I do too. And so when I was in fashion, or excuse me, when I was in pharma, I went about my work every day. I had systems and processes in place that made me very predictable and successful, things that worked for me. But on the outside, on the inside, in my personal life, I was involved in triathlon. I trained alone. So many people trained together or with groups. I couldn't do that because of my work circumstances. I moved into ranching. I ranched in a way that no one else in Oklahoma, or not very many people in Oklahoma, were ranching. I didn't have a lot of land, but I wanted more cattle than the land would hold. And so if I was going to ranch that way, I needed to do it in a way that was very sustainable, which really looked like a rotational grazing, sustainable agriculture way. Don't let them move themselves. I move them, and I tell them where they're going to eat every day. Very sustainable, and didn't use any GMO fertilizing or anything like that, or feeds. I just used a really sustainable way of ranching. That was very unique, and it wasn't a bad thing at all in Oklahoma. It was people, my neighbors watched me in fascination and helped me. But I was doing it in a way that was different. That was disruptive.
Yeah.
When I went to fashion, it was disruptive to focus solely on the customers. Funny as that sounds, so many people have their systems and processes in place and think that they can simply sell customers with inundating them with ads and emails. But I knew that at the heart of success lied the customer experience, and that was disruptive. So I carry this pattern, and then obviously that how much more disruptive can you be to the thought processes of the people around you than to be a somewhat conservative white guy and seek to walk into the most polarizing, divisive role someone can be in today, and that's as someone that has transitioned genders. Highly disruptive.
But I mean, that is not necessarily being disruptive. That is something which is personal and authentic to you. And I in a way, and this is no disrespect at all, I think it's a shame if we do say that is disruptive, because I think what you've done is inspirational, and it is about discovering your authenticity. So do you mind talking a little bit about when you first began thinking that actually I'm not fulfilled and it is something to do with gender?
Well, I think that that's a great question. I think that what was happening is that I realized that the perfectly executed business plan wasn't going to do it. The more cattle or ranching wasn't going to fulfill me anymore. The better race times wasn't going to do it. What was it that I was searching for? And I realized that, when the goalposts aren't fixed, you're constantly moving them. Mm. And so I realized that what was happening with me was the search was internal. It wasn't going to be found in more success on the outside. And so as I started listening to myself and going internal, I realized and noticed what resonated with me, what felt good. And what started with just a innocuous, playful request to put some makeup on me to my wife ended up looking in the mirror, and I looked like a horrible drag queen. Oh. And I thought, well, there's a mistake. But she said something to me that resonated with me for a long time. And she said, you'd make a beautiful woman. And I thought, my goodness, what am I supposed to do with that? So that battle, that internal struggle started, and I would struggle with that for months and months and months until something said, go do it again. But this time have a professional do it instead of your wife. She's Native American. You're using the wrong colors. And so all of this is internal dialogue. And when I came back to the house from that makeup session, I looked in the mirror I put this hair on, and that's a different story, is why was I buying hair? There was nothing saying to go buy hair. I wasn't cross-dressing. I wasn't a cross-dresser. I wasn't doing any of this stuff. I certainly loved women's fashion, but I was now buying hair that I didn't have and had lost decades before. So I put this hair on this beautifully made up face. And I looked in the mirror and I saw something I'd never seen before. And it was as if, as the foundation, the bronzer, and the blush went on, it was as if the costume I'd worn my entire life had come off, and I never realized it.
Oh my goodness.
And so
that's beautiful.
And so it was really an amazing deal. And so the next question became after that was, my goodness, I just found someone that's been buried with a treasure for a long time. And I don't know what to do with it. I can't put it back, but I just don't know where to go from here. And so that's, that was part of the book. That's in the book. And how do you bring that forth? And so anyway, quite a good story.
That's really poignant and beautiful. And that moment can be confusing, emotional. And you said that you were going against, I guess, the box that friends and family put you into. Who did you turn to for support? It sounds like your wife was really supportive.
Well, it was really interesting because we had always had a wonderful, very solid marriage. We dated for a while before, not abnormally long. We dated for a couple of years before, but what we did was we just really ensured that we were a good fit for each other and that our souls were beautiful. We're both attractive to each other, but we really needed to ensure that it was on the inside that mattered. And then we also realized that no one loves us like we love each other. And she saw it coming before I did because she could sense the change. I had made some statements that I had just wanted, with all this checked boxes of success. I sat on the bed one night and I said, I just want to live. Well, that's a really interesting statement for someone to say that's got all this checked boxes behind them. And as we got more intimate in our speaking with each other and talking to each other about the feelings we were having, I think she saw it coming before I did. And that could have been some denial on my part as well. I was a very masculine man. I was always very comfortable in my masculinity too, very, very comfortable. So I think that's one thing, that very comfortable in who I am, who I was, where my masculinity was. And so I think that with that comfort came an ability to say, I'm so comfortable with it, I can let it go. And I can do something that's going to be pretty amazing, not only for me, but just this life's journey.
And this is the thing, you did do something amazing. You did start to live, and that's incredible. But how did you, perhaps when there's those people who couldn't quite see that and couldn't quite understand that and maybe felt threatened by that, how do you protect yourself when you're probably at a vulnerable stage and other people are putting their own judgments and their own issues onto you?
Well, a couple of things. I did, as I was changing, this was not a one fell swoop. My style was changing a little bit. I was wearing a little different fashion style. I explained that away, but I didn't just suddenly decide to be a woman. I changed my style first. And as that was changing, I braced for some pushback, and that never came. And then as I decided to move more into the transition and announce it, I braced for judgment. I braced for pushback, and it never materialized. I did get support from, doing a little bit of therapy. But it was that people were good. Oh. And I didn't live in fear. And the other thing is, I didn't expect to be understood. Is that it's very hard to understand. And I barely understand it myself sometimes, but that's okay. So when I was clear on not understanding it myself, it was going to be highly unfair to expect other people to understand what was going on. So even if I was asked, and I did, I had colleagues say, help me understand. And I'd say, oh, I can't do that. I barely understand myself. But what I could expect was to be respected and accepted. It's very clear, and I'm very clear on it, and I think that the culture could use this advice, is that being accepted doesn't mean agreement.
Yes.
It just provides us a path forward together. And so that's what I was greeted with at every turn, was a path forward together. And I think that was because how I announced and went through my transition. It was public. I was a well-known person, not well-known as in famous, but well-known in that I was in Oklahoma City for a long time in a medical community that was large. I was well-liked. I was social. Mm-hmm. And so it was not going to be uncommon that it wasn't, that it would be talked about.
Yeah.
And so I just took people along for the ride. I announced my transition to my colleagues beforehand. I announced my transition to my clients, who were physicians, beforehand, and it vested them. It vested them in the success of my transition, or at least in the curiosity of how it was going to turn out, which is humorous.
Yeah.
And that's a humorous story, but it vested them in it. And that was a smart, intelligent move. And I wondered, how am I going to do this? And that came from my wife. She gave me a piece of advice that sure sounded funny. She said, when you announce your transition, just go be yourself. And I thought, well, that sounds funny. Masculine Harley riding, cattle ranching guy is going to be himself and tell everybody he's going to be a woman. And that's what I did. And it was very successful.
And I think we can all learn something from that. It's also about managing other people's expectations, seeing the best in other people and in yourself as well. You're staying with us, Andrea. We're going to be back just after this.
Hi, I'm Kelly Melissa Reinhart, host of Make Mental Health Matter. Join me on Mondays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the Achieve TV network right here on E360 TV.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters After Hours. We've got Andrea Leigh with us, and we have been talking about her book, Do You Still Like Football?, as well as gender transition. Now, something that's really special is that you are still married to your wife of 22 years, and that's congratulations. I mean, that's got to be huge to navigate together. Is that just teamwork, or what helped you through that together?
The realization that we had been through a lot of experiences together, incredibly supportive of each other in our endeavors, whether she was supporting me in the sport of triathlon while I had a career going, or supportive with each other on the ranch, learning to orchard together, plant trees together, create a sustainable property, and learn to care for cattle and chickens together. And then we each had been injured in accidents. A training accident for me had injured my back severely. She cared for me, and she had some back injuries and shoulder injuries herself. We cared for each other and nurtured each other back to health. And we just had this realization that we really loved each other deeply, and that no one loved us like each other. And so while it was incredibly beautiful how she responded to my transition, but it didn't go without a tremendous amount of grieving the loss of a masculine husband and the life she envisioned with him. She accepted me in return because, we are who we are on the inside with our souls. We're beautiful souled creatures, but we are also highly, we're fragile. We're fragile people. We've got fragile egos, but we're resilient. And so we each showed that.
That's beautiful.
She's a wonderful, wonderful person. She's a very neat lady herself. So,
and as you were speaking, you get that sense of your souls really do. That's the connection, and it's absolutely beautiful. But you're so right to also mention about the grieving, because there is that loss of another expectation or a belief that you both may have had. And so on that, what do you think people still don't understand about gender transition? Because I don't think we talk about it enough. We don't talk about it enough as openly as you do as well. And often we hear a lot of very painful stories and experiences. So what do we need to talk about more? What do we need to understand more?
Well, I think that that's what makes my story unique, and why I'm, for lack of a better way of saying it, why I'm fascinating. I break a stereotype that's been set by the media and politics in the culture. I break a stereotype and a narrative. I set a new narrative on what a gender transition is like. I think a lot of that has to do with how I own it.
Yes.
I own my transition. I didn't expect others to cater to me. I didn't expect people to understand it. I didn't compel their validation of me by requiring the right pronouns around me. I had known some of the people that I was surrounded with in the work setting for over 20 years. So to compel validation with the right pronoun usage on them was right away, it was going to be difficult to expect. I just didn't think that was right. It was my choice. They could have pushed back, but they didn't. They had responded to me in acceptance. While it didn't always mean they agreed with me, we all had a nice path forward together. I was working with women that were now working with a woman who was a guy 4 months before. So to expect there to be no uncomfortable situations in the restroom was just not realistic. I got up and left meetings a little bit early to make it a little less awkward. So these are the kind of things that I did. I took it upon myself. It was my choice, and transition is a choice. You may feel certain ways and all that stuff that's debatable on every individual transition and circumstance, but to ultimately switch genders is a choice. And so I wanted to make that those consequences mine alone, and really reduce the amount of problems for other people. And everybody ended up coming around and responding with acceptance, and we remained a highly successful team in the workplace. My clients were fantastic. I think the thing that they told me that was quite amazing to me, that set me back more than anything else, was I've got a lot of patients that have done that. And with the number of clients and physicians I told that to, and the number of patients they were referring to, I knew that there was something, and there was some secret that people didn't know about, and that there's a whole hell of a lot of people that live a gender that's different than what their birth certificate says. It's just that most people aren't out in the social media and the public like I am. Most are pretty stealthy and just live their lives. Yeah. So I just had a really good, I really had a good centering of what was really going on here, and what the discussion was about, and who sets the discussion points. And I was quite comfortable that I was within a 80% that were highly indifferent to me. And the 20%, I knew where it was coming from.
Yeah, and thank you for being that representation and that advocate for people. And I also think what's really just, again, so powerful about speaking with you is that you are speaking in a way that's empowered, not a martyr. Somebody else could say what you've said, and it can sound very much, oh, poor me, this was the problem. Whereas it's not. You are really empowered, and you took control, and you've made the choices. And I just think that's wonderful, and we can all learn from that. And now your work as a coach, a speaker, and as an advocate in the mental health arena is you encourage people to be authentic. Why are we falling short? And this can just be authentic even in talking about the thing that we like that other people don't. Why are we so afraid to be ourselves?
Well, I think that we don't know ourselves. I think that we don't pay attention to, I don't think we know ourselves very well. Digging deep into your inner soul, your psyche, is like going after every little nesting doll that's in us. We're like little Russian nesting dolls, and you're going to peel away. You're going to take one layer off, and you're going to learn something about the next one. And then you're going to go deeper and learn something about the doll inside of that, the soul inside of there. And every time you go deeper, you're going to learn something, but you're also going to get uncomfortable, because you're going to find out where your projections come from, and you're going to find out the fears that you have and why those fears are there and where they come from and who might have set those off. And we're all fragile. We're all fragile little beings. I said that at the first of our interview. We're fragile little beings, but we're highly resilient at the same time. But we don't know ourselves. Yes. And so if we would just be comfortable with what resonates with us and how we live our lives, we'd be better off. The authenticity, I find that word fascinating because my mother told me once, she said, be prepared, be prepared. And I said, what for what? And she said, when you say authentic, people could say back to you, Andrea, if you were authentic, you'd be a guy. And I said, that's a good one, Mom. I'll be prepared for that. So what I can say is that I live a life that feels right to me and that resonates with me. And however other people choose to see that or think about that, it's really none of my business. It's not my business what other people think. But what I have come away with is that most people are indifferent to us. And in that indifference is a lot of freedom. Yes. And when you realize that people are indifferent to you, you are free to be yourself without fear of judgment.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible. That is incredible. I'm sorry, I interrupted you about not having the fear of judgment, which is a huge fear we all have.
That's what keeps us. That's what holds us back. Yeah. It's a fear of judgment from a fear of what other people might be thinking of us. And to put it simply, people aren't thinking about us.
Yes,
we project our fears onto them and then assume that they might be thinking that they're not.
Yeah.
People are very self-absorbed into their own lives, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And they're just too busy in their own lives, and that's perfectly fine than to be focused on ours. And when you can really realize that, there's where your freedom lies.
And the research backs you up on that one. We do need to stop thinking about worrying about what other people are thinking, because they are actually thinking about themselves much more. So we're going to hold those thoughts, because I think that recognition that it's our choices, it's our life, and we need to be good with that, because we're the only person really judging ourselves. Hold those thoughts, and we're going to be back with Andrea just after this. Welcome back to Mental Health Matters After Hours. I'm speaking with Andrea Leigh, who's just released the book, Do You Still Like Football? We've been talking about gender transition. We've been talking about authenticity. Now, Andrea, you are unafraid of addressing questions straight on. And I wanted to ask you about the politics involved, because there's such a great post on your Facebook page. And you say this, which I think is brilliant. The question of transgender individuals using restrooms aligned with their birth certificates is often a talking point meant to incite fear. In reality, restrooms have private stalls, and the discomfort some claim to feel seems exaggerated. And this is my favorite bit. Ironically, I imagine certain politicians who push these narratives might be more uncomfortable if I walked into the restroom they suggested I use. That says it all. I love that. It is important to talk about politics in this way, because discrimination is often due to people fear-mongering just for their own agenda. What do you see about that's wrong with the politics surrounding gender?
Well, I think it's one of the last places. Maybe I shouldn't say that, because once they're done with this one, once we get this settled down a little bit, they'll move to something else. But what it is there's not a lot of people that will step forward like I am and cause people to, or ask people to critically think about the issue. The bathroom is pretty simple from the way you read my quote. The issue with politics is that 5 to 10% of the people on the right believe that they'll condemn the cancel culture for canceling those that don't align with woke values, but they fail to see the irony in their own rejection of businesses and individuals that seek diversity or want to be inclusive, like maybe a Bud Light or someone like Garth Brooks.
Yes.
And then on the 5 to 10% over on the far left, you have them continuing to leverage fear that individuals and special interest groups will never be truly free to live the life they want. Unless they're in power. But the left has held power for numerous years, and there's pride parades in every major U.S. and Canadian and British city, yet they still continue to sell the idea that true freedom is out of reach. And all of this is designed to keep people in their corners, when 80% of the people are just largely indifferent to one another and just want the best for themselves. So I call it this compassionate indifference that we operate under, that, I'm not going to hold you to a standard I don't want to be held under. And so 80% of the people are largely indifferent. Politics has to mobilize people on certain issues to attain power, maintain power, and win elections. And I just know what the motives are. And I just like pointing it out, because people that transition gender aren't always articulate as I am and able to understand what's going on with themselves and able to talk about it. I barely understand it, but I can at least talk about it. Yeah. But for every person that transitions, there's a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a grandparent, a cousin that want to understand. And there's no one talking about how they can help them understand or how to help support them in something that they know very little about. Yeah. And so when I realized that by speaking to audiences, my tune changed. That I was willing to answer some questions about it. Am I an expert? Am I an academic expert in gender studies? No, but I've lived it. Yeah. Am I certified in DE&I? Nope, but I've managed it in the fashion world. Yeah. I just know that I'm now living as a woman who used to be a guy, telling everybody else that things aren't as bad as you're being led to believe.
Yeah. So, yes. And sort of relating to that point, I think you've already touched on this. People sometimes think they have the right to just tell other people how to live and how to go about things. And I love your point about compassionate indifference. Yeah. Why do we struggle with that so much? Why do we think we need to have an opinion all the time?
Well, we're asked to have opinions. We're actually told to have opinions. We're shown opinions all the time. Our news media and culture is set up to provide us a window into what the left and the right believe. It's designed to keep us in our corners. They don't particularly care which corner you're in, as long as you pick a side. And the division is what is sought. The being undivided is where most people lie. Most people are indifferent and just want the best for themselves. They work hard at polarizing people. And this is a polarizing and divisive topic because a lot of it is based in fear. Yeah. And the restroom question is based in fear. Some of these things are very easily could be easily solved, but a lot of the questions could be easily solved, but they would rather keep it divisive and polarizing than actually work to it. Most of the questions could be dealt with by critically thinking about them and aren't as polarizing and divisive as one would be led to believe.
And that is politics for you. It is how to keep us all in boxes, different boxes, but for their own means. And that's why we do need to think critically and think what feels right for us. And now for yourself, being a coach, also having transitioned from male to female, you've been afforded an insight of both sides. And sometimes women don't feel assertive enough to be able to speak out. So are you treated differently as a woman compared to when you were a man? And how can we learn from your experience to be more assertive to help ourselves as women?
Well, it's pretty funny. And so just because I'm a real believer in that words mean things, I'm pretty clear on my biology and that I'm a guy or a woman that used to be a guy. I don't get mixed up in the male, female, biology verbiage and all that kind of stuff. But I can say that I've had some really humorous instances, and some are described in the book, of being treated differently when I go to the post office to mail a package versus 4 months before, or simply being, a very technically astute gentleman who then suddenly couldn't appear to hook up the phone and the Bluetooth systems to the car, according to the car tech, simply because I was blonde and blue-eyed now. So that's in a chapter called Mansplaining Can Be Validated. And so
love it.
For someone that wants to be accepted as a woman, I got some serious acceptance real quick. It just wasn't necessarily in the way I wanted. But back to your question. I don't think that we necessarily have to, I'm not sure assertive is right. men behave differently than women. But what I think we could learn from is to ask for what we want. And you don't have to be assertive. You don't have to be super direct. I am, because that's just my personality. And it's hard to change your personality when you change genders. And even though there's some aspects that very much did change for me, but that's what I would tell women, is to ask for what you want and be clear. Don't expect people to know. Don't expect people to guess correctly. Just ask for what you want. And we can take away a lot of the expectations that people can read our minds.
Yes.
And that's what men can do that as well. That's a problem that we all have. We expect others to know what we're thinking when we want something from them.
Yeah, that's very true. And then we get disappointed and resentful when they can't guess, because
that's correct. That's right.
Yeah, and we don't even know ourselves sometimes, but it really helps us to know what we want, and then we can ask for it. I think that's really important. Andrea, what top 3 tips would you give somebody to start living their most authentic life? I know that's a big question, but
well, I think it's a fantastic question to start noticing what resonates with you. So the hobbies you engage in, the work that you're involved in, the relationships you're in, does this resonate with me? Does this feel right to me? Or am I engaging in this relationship, in this hobby, in this career that I find myself in? Am I doing it out of expectation, waiting for my magic number of retirement or whatever to hit? I think I'd start noticing what resonates. The other thing I would do is that if the meaning and purpose of life, as Joseph Campbell said, meaning and purpose of life is found in the experience of it. So if you really want to dig in and find the meaning and purpose of life, then start saying yes to new experiences. And that's what I did. I started saying yes to the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to run triathlon and know what it was like to suffer and go from suffering to joy. I wanted to live on a ranch. I lived in Oklahoma, but I always grown up in the city, but I wanted to ranch and raise cattle. And so I found a way to do it on my own terms. And then I went back to the joys that I had as a child, and that was riding motorcycles. And so I reconnected with that. So, and all of these things that had resonated with me. So I would really encourage people to notice what resonates and say yes to new experiences, and then to not fear judgment, because people simply are not thinking about you like you fear that they are. So go be yourself. People aren't judging you. Say yes to new experiences and notice what feels right.
Oh, Andrea, that is just beautiful. I could speak to you all day. You are so right. You're so inspiring, and you've given me so much to think about. Where can we learn more about you? Where can we get your book? How do we get in touch with you?
Well, get the book. Do You Still Like Football? You'll get to know me better. You'll see the vulnerable, truthful, you'll just see a really side of me that's very honest and vulnerable about my career and pharma, how I took a stand around COVID, how I transitioned, and how I invited people in to do that with me, and then how I responded to my own transition in ways that I was not proud of, in ways that I found humorous, in ways that were ways that I found that I was proud of myself. And AndreaLeigh.com is just a great way to connect with me. If someone wants to connect with me with the call, get to know me better, bring me into their corporation, their university, to talk on these issues, to their church groups. My church group talks have been amazing. Regardless of the political spectrum, people find it fascinating from the right and the left, because people simply don't talk about these issues. But the book is amazing. It's been a bestseller in 6 categories. We're still in the top of the bestseller charts. It's fantastic. I'm so proud of it. I'm glad I wrote it when other people said books are just an expensive business card. And I said, this will be different. Yeah. And so I love speaking about this. I love writing about it in my website. So, and the podcast, The Andrea Leigh Show, is now loaded up with its first trailer on Apple, and we'll be getting onto all the other platforms within days.
Amazing. Amazing. Andrea, thank you so much. And I hope to be able to speak with you again soon.
Oh, I look forward to it. It's been fantastic, Audrey. Thank you so much for having me.
Such a pleasure. And we'll now go on to Test the Trend. In today's Test the Trend, I wanted to talk about holding space. Now, I know holding space has got a little bit of a funny reputation of late, with an interview from the stars of Wicked using the term, and people got a little bit confused. But what holding space actually means in the therapeutic community is being able to hold people's anxieties, being able to hold people's experiences and feelings, and letting them express themselves. And so one way of holding space, especially if someone wants to talk to you, is to ask questions about what they've said. Don't try and make it all better. Don't try and dismiss how they're feeling. Just simply, if somebody says, oh, you know, I'm feeling really stupid, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, hold that space for them by just saying, I'm really sorry you feel that way. Why? What's going on? And in allowing that to happen, they'll be able to have more of that conversation, express more of what they need, and they won't be worrying about you judging them, or you won't be worried about what to say next, because it's all about expressing in that space that you've been given. So give that a go this week. If somebody wants to express something and you've got the time to do it, try and hold that space for them and see how that can bring you closer.
I go to lots of customers' houses. They have belts perhaps all on hangers or hanging on their door, and they look untidy. The door doesn't open properly. So I just wanted to show you a good way of rolling a belt and keeping it in place. So you get the end of the belt and you put it into the hole this way, and then you just literally roll it around so that it goes inside. And then you can pull it tighter. There we go. Much better. It stays in place, and then you can stack them. So you can stack them, or you can put them in your drawers, but they stay together, so that's much better. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is folding, because actually folding makes a massive difference in your drawers and things like that. So, and you get much more in. So these are just some standard pyjamas. So I just thought I would show you quickly how to do this. So fold your bottoms, and then with your top, so I fold all of my t-shirts usually like this. I just hold it, put my fingers there and bend it back so that you get a nice straight line with the arms tucked in. Then pop your bottoms in there, and there you go. So when you come to get your pyjamas, you can just grab it and go. It's all together. And they stack up really nicely, so they look really good as well and aesthetically pleasing. Things like jeans. So jeans, if you've got a shelf for them, they work really well. But again, it's about the folding really. So I usually fold them always so that the pockets are on the outside. And it's so simple. Fold them like this, and you can make a pile so that goes on your shelf. Or if you haven't got a shelf, another good thing is in a drawer. So with the jeans again, I would fold them. So into, and then they're almost rolled really. And then they stack in your drawer along like this. And you can get lots to the side. So that works really well as well. And then the other one is, now this is really if you love organising, because a lot of people would not be bothered with this. I love it. Obviously, I'm an organiser, so I do try and do this. But you can see how chunky these socks are, right? I'll just show you the difference. So you just roll it down. And then you get the end of the sock like this and just bend it over like that. So that's much different, you can see, which means you're going to get a lot more socks in your drawer. And if you're like me and like things aesthetically pleasing, then you can, you know, have them all lined up. So that's that. I think that's everything today. So thank you very much for listening, and hope you've got some good tips from it.
Wow. What an eye-opening show. It's so important to have these conversations and actually have them just as openly as you've seen us have today. So if you've been moved by anything on this show, please do join us in the comments and join the conversation, and have a very good night.